Hey guys, it's Cassandra here. I'm also known as Dist. Um, so I was watching the news earlier today, and I saw that in Philadelphia there was a another mass shooting. There was 3 people killed and I think a dozen injured. And I started to think about how my behavior and my actions impact the world and how I intend them to impact the world, and then how they actually do. And so I decided to put together this video about agency. So the last video I posted was about constraints. And so constraints in the last video are kind of a subset, or kind of an aspect, an angle of this concept called structure. So I may have used the word structure, but structure is an even broader term than the way I described it in the last video. So in the last video, I described primarily constraints, right? So I described institutions and organizations that are responsible for creating rules that guide and govern people's behavior. And so those are a particularly acute aspect of structure, as this concept in international relations. That's the framework of thought that I studied in school. I studied international relations. It's also called global affairs, and in some places it's called political science. And so for my undergraduate degree, I studied global affairs. And then for my master's degree, I studied political science. And my research focus throughout both of my degrees was on security studies and the ways that information systems and information technology interacts with society, the ways that institutions, governments, and organizations and individuals, the way they all use information systems, the way they use computers and the Internet of Things and technology in general. And so today's video is about agency. And so in order for me to really describe agency, I want to kind of reiterate some of the things I talked about in the last video, specifically the relationship between structure and constraint. And so structures are these kinds of social concepts that are embedded within society. So whether it be institutions like Congress, the executive branch, the judiciary, maybe the FBI is an institution, or whether it be organizations, they comprise the social structures all around us. So there's businesses, there's government entities, there's individuals. Individuals kind of play a little bit differently, and that we'll get to that when we get to agency. So these kind of structures, you can think about them in 2 different ways. You can think about them as concepts, or you can think about them as physical structures. And so physical structures exist, buildings exist, and so those are an example of physical structures. In international relations theory, they're not really referring to physical structures. They're typically referring to the conceptual structures that guide our behavior, that organize society, that structure society. So that's institutions and the laws they create. And then my argument in the last video is that some of the structure that governs human behavior today is embedded within information systems. It's created by individuals and organizations, and to some extent governments, which manufacture and deploy information systems throughout the information environment. So So I guess I should slow down. The information environment is a new kind of a newish term. It was pulled from a uh, the DoD dictionary, basically. So it's a term used to describe um, information systems and the individuals who operate them in relationship to information. So information is consumed by individuals and it's produced by individuals and it's transmitted from one individual to another through the information environment. And the information environment includes cyberspace. So it includes the physical computer in front of me and the internet connection through my local area network. And then it includes the wide area network of the internet. And then it also includes all of the things um, on the wide area network. And then it also includes all of the people using the wide area network, the people using the internet. And so this concept of the information environment brings up, um, it deviates from standard definitions of the internet by including the individual who's, in front of the computer. And so to some extent, you can argue that it includes the individual who's embedded in the information environment, the individual who is surrounded by the information environment. So you can think of it at a physical level. You live in a city, a populated city that has radio towers and cell phone towers, and they produce microwaves and they produce radio transmissions, and those permeate the environment, they permeate the air. And so as an individual, we typically focus on the computer, but it's important to, I mean, it's not necessarily important, but you can think of yourself as physically embedded in the information environment. It's not wrong to do so, but the information environment really includes the information. It really kind of focuses more on the information. So as an individual, I generate content by going on YouTube or going on, up until a few minutes ago, I could go on Facebook, but then there was a cyber attack and uh, an exploit, and I got locked out of my account. And so I'm upset because I'm isolated from my friends and family right now, and I had been kind of self-isolating for a little while, and that was a hard thing for me to do. And I did it for the safety of my family, and I did it for the safety of myself, right? And then it was really hard for me today when I got locked out of my Facebook account, because I realized, I'm not really self-isolating anymore. I just don't have a way to communicate with my friends and family anymore. And so that was really hard. That just happened a few minutes ago. But really, back to the point of the video, the information environment can be thought of as part of the structures of society, right? So, and I think maybe it may be simpler to focus on cyberspace and to focus on the Internet of Things and the constraints and structures that they provide, right? So they provide structures that we can use to facilitate communications. They provide the internet is notorious for enabling communications. In the last video, we focused on constraints, but this one we're kind of broadening the lens and trying to understand structure as it is defined in international relations. And so the core curriculum typically focuses on institutions and social structures, organizations and governments and laws and rules and to some extent regulations. And those, you kind of narrow the focus down into rules and regulations, and you introduce this concept of constraints. But the bigger picture is that structures do more than just constrain individual behavior. They facilitate individual behavior too. So the structures of government, or government as a kind of structural concept, it enables us to interact with each other in a meaningful way. So in a way that we can all understand each other's behavior. So it facilitates our interactions. It facilitates our organization. So it allowed, the First Amendment allows for the freedom of assembly, and the Constitution allows for the separation of powers, and those are kind of structures that are embedded within society, so that the executive branch can't necessarily interfere with the ongoings of Congress. And that's still kind of a narrow constraint perspective. But from a broader perspective, these social structures enable Congress to pass legislation, which we need to function in society. And it enables the executive branch to do the same. It enables the executive branch to pass the legislation that we need in society. It enables engineers to create uh, information systems that we can use to communicate with each other. And it's those structures that make our communications meaningful. There's this concept of constructivism. It's a type of it's an epistemological framework in international relations, which focuses on the mutual construction of international politics. So as governments and sovereign states and individuals and organizations interact with each other on a moment to moment or day by day or year by year basis, whatever time frame you look at them, they're constantly creating the world of international politics that we are embedded in. They're creating the they're not only creating the actual international politics, but they're interacting with the study of international politics. So it's kind of a neat framework for studying international relations. And the study of constructivism introduced these concepts into the study of international relations, and introduced the concept of structure and introduced the concept of agency. And so if we can understand how the structures enable our behavior. So these so say political parties, for example, they enable people to frame the world in a way that they understand, in a way that fits with their value system. So the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are two conceptually structural entities which exist, and they enable people to frame ideas and frame politics and frame events in a meaningful way to them, right? So that's a kind of a key concept in the study of political science, where it's called the unmoved mover. It shapes our understanding of the world, and it's very constant in the study of political science. And so I guess the focus of the video here is agency, right? So agency is this separate concept. So it's related to structures and it's related to constraints, but agency really is defined as the kind of willful expression of your individual desires and beliefs and feelings and abilities. It's a concept that describes your ability to behave in the world, your ability to act, to interact with the world. You interact with the world with your agency, with your intention, with your own meanings, with your own identity. And so the relationship here is, as it's studied in international relations, is it's kind of they're not conflicting, but they're interacting pieces of the puzzle. So an individual interacts with the world, and as he does so, he interacts within the structures of the world. He interacts using his agency. He actually interacts using his intention within the structures embedded in society. He maneuvers through the different structural pieces, and then there's this concept of constraint. So the idea is that individuals are both enabled by structure. They're enabled to function meaningfully with each other through these shared structures. So these shared organizations and institutions and sovereign states. And and then at the same time, their agency, their ability, their action is constrained by those structures, right? So I think that was really what I wanted to communicate in the video today. And I do have a point. I promise I'm gonna get to it eventually. I just have to really figure out what the different key stakeholders are currently doing, and that's, it's an ever changing it's kind of an ever changing environment. So they're always, I mean, they move very rapidly. So I think the last video I ended, I said that, I'm in this predicament where I'm part of the people who create these structures, and I'm, in a couple different ways, and I eventually hope to be able to tell you more about that. But at least at the very least, I can tell you that I work with information systems, and in my job title, I'm what's called an AI ops engineer or a DevOps engineer, and so my role in society is to design software which another group of people we call software developers use to automate things they do every day. So software developers write software that they intend for you to use on your computer. So somebody wrote the Chrome browser that I'm using to stream this video. It was Google. Google wrote their Chrome browser. They wrote it in a computer programming language. And then there's another team of individuals called DevOps engineers who took the software from the software developers, and they gave them another tool to use. And they wrote this tool for software developers to use to put the software they wrote, to put Chrome on your computer. And that's kind of a bad example because it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it usually happens within organizations. And so imagine that there was a systems administrator who wanted to deploy the Chrome package to all of the computers within an organization. It would be up to the software developers to write that piece of software, and then it would be up to the team of DevOps engineers to facilitate the deployment of that software onto all of the machines within that organization. And so then there's another role I play. It's called an AI ops engineer. And so as an AI ops engineer, I'm responsible for monitoring the feedback from different information systems, and then designing software that is responsible for reacting to that feedback. So that could mean any number of things, right? But I mean, typically the information is monitored through artificially intelligent algorithms, and that's why it's called AI ops. But I mean, it's related to DevOps because it could be that given a particular event stream in the department, the software developers and the systems administrators at an organization decide we want to respond to this event stream, which is kind of monitored through artificial intelligence. Information environment within the organization is monitored through artificial intelligence, and given a particular set of outcomes, we want to deploy the Chrome package again, right? So that's kind of an automated process, and it's heavily involved in. I mean, they're very closely related. The DevOps team and the AI ops team are closely related, and even in smaller organizations, it's probably the same team. So I wanted to post this video today because I've been working on something for a while now that that's really got me stumped, and I think it has a lot of my peers in the security industry stumped. And one of the concerning metrics I was monitoring was the are kind of outbursts of violence, right? So if you break the information environment down, and you kind of pretend that we all exist in this organization, you can say that, and this is kind of okay. And the end result is one of the outcomes, while monitoring the information environment, could be an outburst of violence, right? So individuals are not included within the definition of cyberspace, but they are included within the definition of the information environment, right? So they are part of the information within the information environment. So they consume information systems, and they produce information which goes into information systems, and that information is contained both, well, arguably, without argument, it's contained within the information systems itself, and it's transmitted through this information itself. And you get into kind of a political debate after a while, where some individuals and some governments, specifically China and Russia, argue that information is stored within individuals itself. And that's a particularly controversial concept within the United States, at the very least, because introduces this idea that you're not only a human being, right, but you are to certain organizations, to certain institutions, and specifically to two sovereign states, considered a node in the information environment. You're considered a part of the computing network, right? So in America, there are two very distinct sets of rules and regulations which govern the behavior of information systems, and those are even that can be broken down into two categories. One is the kind of embedded rules and constraints that are written in software, that are written in hardware. They're written throughout the UI, and then there's this other set of rules that are laws which govern the way software developers can write software, and they also govern the way that individuals can operate computers. But then taking another step towards agency, humans are maybe constrained by the information environment, the way that it's designed, but they're also enabled by it. So they are specifically distinguished in the law, right? So they're specifically different than computers in the law in the United States of America, and they have rights are afforded to humans that there are no rights afforded to computers. There's no rights afforded to cell phone towers. There's no rights afforded to your cell phone. There's no rights afforded to your cat, for that matter. So your computer and your cat fall into this category called civilian objects, and you fall into a category called civilian non-combatants. And so both of these categories are presumably protected by the Geneva Conventions. They're protected from attack by militias, whether that be militias of sovereign states or militaries, or whether that be independent or clandestine militias. So I'd say the vast majority of people are protected by the Geneva Conventions, and the vast majority of the information environment is also protected by the Geneva Conventions as a civilian object. And so I guess I got a little sidetracked. I was back to this whole concept of AI ops. At an organization level, one of the things you might monitor would be computer information system, or a set of computer information systems. You can monitor them through logs. You can monitor them through external surveillance. You can monitor them through internal surveillance. And all of those systems produce feedback, and then there's these algorithms which monitor the feedback from those information systems. And then if you were to abstract that organizational paradigm to kind of a bigger, more global paradigm, because the internet is connected throughout the whole world, and at the very least, it's connected throughout here in the sovereign United States of America. Um, so monitoring that whole information environment includes both monitoring individuals and their behavior, and it also includes monitoring the information systems that are, you know, that connect the information environment, that make up the information environment. And so, even though they might be governed by two very distinct sets of legislation, there's these kind of structures which surround both of them, right? Um, so they're related through those structures, and they're enabled to interact with each other through those social structures, and they kind of embody those social structures. They end up creating those social structures after this kind of whole idea of globalization makes the argument that the world kind of took a turn together towards a more interconnected society. And so if you abstract this idea of the information environment, you take AI ops out of the organization, and you hand it over to security professionals who work at a much higher level. They can be said to be responsible for monitoring the information environment as a whole. And so one of the metrics that I was looking for, because of a problem I've been working on for a few years, is an increase in outbursts of violent crime. And so I was really upset today when I saw that there was another mass shooting. And so I felt like it was important to make this video and kind of expose my train of thought a little bit, so that maybe I can eventually produce some kind of meaningful analysis for policymakers, who can help us solve some of the problems like the one they encountered today or yesterday morning in Philadelphia. So I guess the next time I'm not sure what direction I'm gonna go yet, but I'll see you then.